Hi and welcome to another episode of Talking Trade. I'm Ian Coxhead at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And I'm Sandi Siegel, president of MEJ.
And today we're very pleased to welcome a colleague of mine, Paul Castaneda Dower. Paul is an assistant professor, soon to be associate professor of Ag and Applied Economics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a member of the Wisconsin-Russia Project. Paul is a specialist on the economy and the economic history of Russia and Eurasia, and he has lived and worked in Moscow for 7 years, from 2008 to 2015. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Now, Paul, here's a puzzle. It used to be a trope that countries that do trade with each other don't go to war. And here at the moment, with Russia invading Ukraine, we have two countries that are very closely linked in trade, in investment, in labor markets and more, and yet one has invaded the other. So how might we account for Russia's actions?
Yeah, so, I mean, first, to be clear, I think this is, Putin's actions, not Russians' actions. So we should, right away, we should distinguish that. But yeah, many people were in complete shock in Russia, right along with the rest of the world, that this would happen. It's very perplexing, and it's really, I think some people I know are refusing to entertain any kind of logic to this type of action. And so, but if we were to entertain some kind of logic, we kind of have to start with Putin's worldview, and that's that, he's an essential historical figure that is, at a critical moment, providing protection and preserving Russian culture. And
this is Putin's interpretation of his own role, right?
Yes, his interpretation of his own role. Now, that worldview, that particular aspect of the worldview is probably, might be shared by some people in Russia, but certainly not all. But there is some aspects of his worldview that are shared within Russia, and that's important to keep an account of. That, Russians have withstood, many attacks throughout their history, survived many attacks. They have contributed a lot to the world, in this worldview, and they also have sacrificed a lot for the world. And so, and they feel slighted in some sense on the world stage, and Putin definitely has expressed that. So that's part of it. But so why? The other kind of aspect of Putin's worldview is tied into this. His essential character is the fact that he, if he loses power, then he can't be the savior, of course. But he also, might, with the loss of power, his life might be short on this earth because of all the crimes and corruption that he's engaged in.
Right.
So, this is strong motivation for him. But why invade Ukraine? I think there are kind of two reasons. One is the security reason, which has been given a lot of attention in the media, and you may disagree about, whether that's real or not, but he's certainly using it as a reason. And the second is probably less well understood, and that's precisely because Ukraine is so close to Russia, and this comes back to your question, economically, culturally, historically, politically, all these things, because they're so close, that if Ukraine is able to successfully integrate with the West and democratize in a successful way, this means that it can be done in Russia too, and that's very problematic for Putin's worldview, that Russia needs a strong leader, autocratic regime, and needs to distance itself from the West in order to survive.
Fascinating. So I can switch gears a little bit and talk about the impact on trade. We've already recognized, the increase in fuel cost, and that's going to affect all of trade and transportation and so forth. In regards to commodities and some of the other key trading partners for Russia, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so if you take Russia and Ukraine together, they produced a fourth of the world's wheat, a fifth of the world's corn. Ukraine itself is the largest exporter in sunflower seed oil, And so obviously this is going to have huge effects across the globe. And we're already in a situation where there's, we already have food prices are high. And so, with the pandemic's disruption of the global supply chains, this is, going to be an additional kind of perfect storm, if you will, to impact global prices. But in terms of specific trading partners, China is an important trading partner. Egypt is an important trading partner. Turkey is an important one. If we think about just Russia, Russia exports a lot of wheat to Nigeria. So, everywhere is going to be affected, I think. But, and then if we think about kind of, Russia or Ukraine exports a lot of agricultural goods. And if we think about the growing season and the disruption that this conflict might, if it, continues, winter wheat is, of course, the main exporter. So this has already been sown in September, but it's going to be harvested in early summer. This could be completely disrupted. For sunflower seed oil, this is going to be, harvested in the spring. Sown in the spring. And this is exactly in the Kharkiv and Luhansk region. And then, that'll be harvested in September. And then usually it's transported, since most of it is exported in Ukraine, it's transported down to Black Sea ports, which are completely disrupted at the moment. And so all that processing takes place at the ports.
Huge impact. I understand the Netherlands and Germany are huge export destinations for Russia. Do you think Putin anticipated our European allies to, join sanctions so quickly, and will that get his attention?
Yeah, I don't know whether he anticipated it or not, but I think one thing I think it kind of plays into his hand a little bit, that there's this united reaction across Europe, in that the only explanation, the explanation that Putin will put forward is that, look, see, the only reason people are helping Ukraine is because they hate Russia, and they hate it so much that they're willing to sacrifice these. They're hugely dependent on us, and they're still willing to do it. They only do it because Ukraine's unimportant. They just do it because they don't like Russia. And so this kind of reinforces his whole narrative, which maybe he anticipated, maybe he didn't, but it certainly works in his favor in some ways.
Valuable insight. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, Paul, you lived and worked in Moscow for 7 years. So it may be that you can, if in a sense, read the Russian mood a little differently to the way it's being presented in the media here. So how do you see US media coverage of the invasion? In your view, is it accurate? Is it complete?
Well, it's hard to say, in time of war, it's really hard to say whether, information is accurate or not. But I think the press coverage is typically, it tends to be very one-sided when it comes to Russia. And of course, Russia, the media is also one-sided. But I think kind of a key aspect of the U.S. press coverage, that it tends to be dismissive of things that are very important to Russians. The role of history, the importance of culture and language, and it doesn't really give due attention to that, at least in terms of how Russians are thinking about the conflict. If we think about, even if we just go back to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Donbass region, wanted more autonomy from Ukraine. They, under the Soviet Union, they were given the opportunity to learn in their mother tongue. Each person could be educated in their own mother tongue. Then there were a lot of Russians in the Donbass region. And when Ukraine became independent, they petitioned for Russian to become an official language already in the 90s.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. And so they suffered for that. Then recently, Russia became an official language when you had one of Putin's people in power. But then that law was only recently ruled unconstitutional. So now Russian can no longer be, is no longer in use. So there's this, these nuances here that really matter for Russians.
I see. So in Russia, these kinds of actions may be seen as slights that go beyond security concerns to deeper cultural, social kind of phenomena. Huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's an interesting insight.
Paul,
Go ahead.
no, just so interesting and obviously very timely. So perhaps we can invite you back, though I hope this is not a long drawn out affair for everyone's sake. But thank you for joining us today. Really nice to have you as a guest on Talking Trade.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, Paul Castaneda Dower, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all on the next episode of Talking Trade. Till then.